She was already regretting saying yes to the invitation before she even stepped into the ballroom. Elise hated weddings. She hated the forced smiles, the orchestrated emotions, the endless small talk with people she'd never see again. But she had promised her coworker Nina she'd go, and Nina had begged, "Please, Elise, I can't survive my cousin's wedding without someone sane to talk to." So Elise said yes, expecting to stay an hour, maybe two. What she didn't expect was to walk into the massive golden cream ballroom of the Belrose Hotel, check in at the front desk, and be escorted by a smiling attendant directly to the main table. She was confused, but didn't argue. Not until she saw her own name card, elegantly printed in silver ink, right next to the head seat at the long bridal table. And on that head seat sat a woman Elise had only seen in magazines and finance blogs, Vivian Hart, the famously private tech millionaire known for buying out entire buildings in Manhattan and for keeping her personal life sealed tighter than a vault. And now here she was, in real life, in an off-white custom suit with a minimal bridal corsage pinned to her chest, looking stunning and powerful and slightly amused as Elise stood frozen beside her. "You're late," Vivian said, sipping her champagne without looking up. Elise blinked. "I think there's been a mistake." "No mistake," Vivian replied, finally meeting her eyes. "You're sitting here." Elise laughed, awkward, trying to step back. "I think you've confused me with someone else. Elise Morgan, graphic designer at Lark & Co., lives in Brooklyn, allergic to shellfish, rarely answers phone calls, hates public speaking," Vivian said, her voice calm, her tone factual. "That's you, isn't it?" Elise's stomach dropped. She hadn't given her full name at check-in. And how the hell did Vivian Hart know any of that? "How do you sit?" Vivian said, gently but firmly. People were watching. Hey, if you're enjoying this story, go ahead and drop a like to help us grow even more. And let me know in the comments, on a scale from 0 to 10, what score would you give this story so far? Your feedback makes all the difference. The entire ballroom had quieted, just a little, the way people do when they feel something off-script is happening. Elise felt her throat tighten. "Seriously, what is this?" "It's a mistake," Vivian admitted. "But a useful one. And maybe even fate." Elise frowned. "I'm not following." Vivian leaned slightly closer. Her voice was low, private. "The woman who was supposed to sit here ran 30 minutes before the ceremony. Cold feet, I guess. And since the table was already set and the name matched," Elise shook her head. "You thought I'd just play along?" Vivian smiled. "I thought you'd be curious enough not to walk away immediately. Which you are, aren't you?" Elise didn't respond. She was too stunned, too caught off guard by this gorgeous woman with eyes like winter storms and a voice that made her feel like she was being let in on a secret no one else could hear. "There's no ceremony," Vivian continued. "Not anymore. But the dinner, the guests, the press, they're still here. And I need someone beside me tonight who doesn't flinch, who doesn't try to pry or perform. Someone real. And you think that's me?" Elise asked, eyebrows raised. "I did my research." "So you're asking me to what? Pretend to be your bride?" "No," Vivian said softly. "I'm asking you to stay. Just for tonight. Sit beside me. Share a dinner. Let them think what they want. Be my +1 to my almost wedding." Elise should have walked away. Every red flag was waving. But something in Vivian's eyes wasn't dangerous. It was lonely, honest, maybe even desperate. And Elise, against all reason, slowly pulled out the chair. "This is insane," she whispered. "Probably," Vivian agreed. "But maybe not the worst mistake you've ever made." And as the string quartet began to play again, Elise sat beside a woman she didn't know, who somehow knew too much, and smiled at the cameras flashing from across the room, wondering what the hell she had just agreed to. The clink of silverware against fine porcelain filled the air, layered under a soft instrumental version of a jazz classic that Elise couldn't place. The grand ballroom of the Belrose Hotel gleamed around her, warm light bouncing off gilded mirrors, tall flower arrangements dripping with soft pink orchids, and guests dressed in silk, chiffon, and overpriced confidence. Elise's skin felt too tight. Her dress, an old navy cocktail number she'd worn maybe 3 times before, suddenly felt underdressed, outdated, and way too revealing. Everyone at the bridal table looked like they'd stepped out of a fashion editorial. And next to her sat Vivian Hart, casually magnetic in her tailored cream suit, sipping her wine like none of this was strange at all. Elise hadn't touched her food. She was too busy pretending she belonged there. Vivian leaned slightly closer. "You should eat," she said, her voice low, and meant just for Elise. "They'll think I'm starving you." Elise gave a tight, nervous laugh. "I don't even know what this is," she whispered, gesturing to the delicately plated dish in front of her. "Crab risotto with white truffle," Vivian answered without looking. "You're allergic to shellfish, though. Don't eat it." Elise blinked.
"Right.
"Forgot you somehow know that." "It's not sinister," Vivian said. "I just like knowing who's at my table." Elise eyed her, skeptical. "You invited me by accident."
Technically, yes.
"But I decided to keep you here by choice." Vivian finally turned to her. "And you're still here. That says something." "I'm still trying to figure out if I'm part of a PR stunt or just collateral damage in a rich person's life crisis," Elise muttered. Vivian didn't laugh. Instead, she looked at Elise with something more serious. "She left a note," she said. Elise blinked. "Who?" "The woman I was supposed to marry." Vivian's fingers tapped softly against her wine glass. It wasn't a real engagement. It was more of a merger. 2 powerful families combining business and legacy. She and I liked each other, got along, but there was never love. And she knew that better than I did. Elise watched her carefully. Vivian wasn't performing. Her posture was composed, but her voice held tension, the subtle weight of something real. She said I didn't need a mirror. I needed a challenge, Vivian continued. Someone who wouldn't just reflect the life I built, but push me beyond it. Someone unpredictable.
Alive.
Elise shifted in her seat. "And you think that's me?" Vivian finally smiled. "I didn't. Until you sat down." The table conversation around them buzzed with forced laughter and gentle gossip. Elise caught a woman across from her whispering something behind a napkin. Cameras flashed at intervals from a distance. "They think we're together," Elise said quietly. "Some of them probably think we just got married." "Let them," Vivian murmured. "It's easier than explaining the truth." "You mean the part where your almost wife bailed and you replaced her with a complete stranger who happened to have the same first name on the guest list?" "Exactly." Elise exhaled slowly. "What happens when this dinner ends?" Vivian looked at her. "We thank everyone for coming. Smile for the press. And then I ask if I can take you out for real. Somewhere quiet. No cameras. Just 2 women who met at a wedding that never happened." Elise's brow furrowed. "You're serious?" "Completely." Elise didn't know what stunned her more, the surreal chaos of being accidentally mistaken for the bride, or the fact that this guarded, intimidating woman was speaking to her with genuine softness. "You could have chosen anyone," Elise said. "Why me?" Vivian studied her. "Because you didn't want to be here. And yet you stayed. You're not performing. You're not trying to impress anyone. And somehow, in the middle of all this, you're the only one who feels real." Elise looked down at her barely touched plate. "This is insane." "A little," Vivian admitted. "But also, maybe not." There was a pause. Not awkward, just full. Elise didn't know what made her do it. Maybe the exhaustion, maybe the heat of Vivian's gaze, but she finally picked up her fork. "I'll eat," she said. "But only if you promise dessert isn't shellfish." Vivian smiled, a real one this time.
"Deal."
And just like that, something shifted. The tension didn't vanish, but it evolved. From panic into curiosity. From chaos into something slower, more controlled. Over the next hour, they spoke in between courses about books, about music, about how Elise had once been in a cappella group in college and regretted it every day since. Vivian told her about being the only woman on a tech board full of men in navy suits. About how silence, when wielded correctly, could be louder than shouting. And when the last toast was made and the last camera flashed, Vivian turned to her and asked, "Do you want to get out of here?" Elise hesitated, just for a moment, then nodded. And as they slipped out the side entrance, leaving the noise of the ballroom behind, Elise wondered if maybe, just maybe, the strangest night of her life was about to become the most honest one too. The city looked different from inside the back seat of a black town car, the kind with leather seats that smelled faintly of expensive cologne and money. Elise sat quietly, her hands folded tightly in her lap, eyes flicking between the window and the woman seated beside her. Vivian hadn't spoken since they left the Belrose ballroom, and the silence was thick, not awkward, but full of everything unsaid. Elise didn't know what to do with her hands, her breath, her thoughts. She felt like she was hovering outside her own body, watching herself play a role she hadn't auditioned for. "Do you always hijack strangers' lives like this?" she asked finally, her voice soft but edged with a dry kind of humor. Vivian turned to her, lips twitching slightly. "Only on special occasions." Elise let out a small laugh, tension breaking slightly in her chest. "So, where are we going?" "Somewhere quiet," Vivian said. "You deserve a night that's actually yours." Elise tilted her head. "What does that mean?" Vivian didn't answer. Instead, she reached forward and pressed a button on the console. A divider slid up, separating them from the driver. "Privacy." Elise raised an eyebrow. "Is this the part where you reveal I've been recruited into a secret society?" Vivian smiled faintly. "No cults. No conspiracies. Just dinner. Real dinner this time. Without eyes. Without cameras. Without expectations." "Is that what this is? A no-pressure date with the woman who accidentally made me her bride in front of 200 people?" "Something like that," Vivian said. Elise exhaled through her nose, smiling despite herself. "You're very calm about all this." "I'm not," Vivian said. "But calm is the only thing I know how to be when everything else is a mess." There was something in her voice that made Elise turn to really look at her. Under the perfectly tailored suit, the glossy hair, the diamond-studded watch, there was exhaustion. Not surface tiredness, but something deeper. Like Vivian had been holding her breath for years. "You don't seem like someone who loses control often," Elise said. Vivian's eyes flicked to hers. "I don't. That's why tonight was terrifying. And freeing." Elise nodded slowly. "You didn't want to marry her, did you?" Vivian looked back out the window. "No. I wanted the illusion. I thought if I could just go through the motions, do what was expected, maybe I'd eventually believe in it. But she was braver than me. She walked away. And left you to face it all alone. Until you sat down." Elise fell silent. There was weight in those words, and it settled on her shoulders in a way she wasn't expecting. The car pulled into a narrow street in Soho, stopping in front of a low-key restaurant with no name on the front. Just a soft glow behind frosted glass and the muffled sound of jazz piano from inside. Vivian got out first and extended a hand. Elise hesitated for a moment, then took it. Her hand was warm, steady. Inside, the restaurant was quiet, almost private, the kind of place that didn't need to be advertised because the right people already knew. A hostess greeted Vivian by name and led them to a table in a back corner, away from the windows, half hidden by velvet drapes. Elise sank into her chair, feeling like she could finally breathe. "So this is where you bring your accidental wives?" Elise teased. Vivian let out a soft laugh. "No. This is where I come when I need to remember who I am." "And who is that exactly?" Elise asked, more genuinely than she expected. Vivian looked at her for a long moment. "Someone who's still figuring it out." The waiter arrived with a quiet smile, offering wine, then leaving them with menus written entirely in French. Elise blinked. "I took Spanish in school." Vivian smirked. "I'll translate. Trust me?" "That's a bold ask, considering tonight started with identity theft." "Mild case," Vivian said. "At worst." Elise laughed, genuinely this time, and the sound of it made something ease in Vivian's shoulders. For the first time that night, Elise felt the air between them shift. The roles were still there, rich woman, accidental guest, but something else was forming underneath. A kind of tentative curiosity. A slow, flickering interest that had nothing to do with the spectacle of the wedding. Over dinner, they talked about things that weren't headlines or contracts. Vivian asked Elise about her design work, about the art she made just for herself. Elise asked about the first time Vivian realized she hated being alone in a room full of people. They traded stories. Elise shared how her mother always said she had the heart of a stray dog, always picking up broken things and trying to love them whole.
Vivian said she envied that.
That she didn't know how to let things in unless they proved they couldn't hurt her first. And when dessert came, thankfully shellfish-free, they both reached for the same spoon at the same time and laughed.
Soft. Surprised. Honest.
The night stretched long until the restaurant began to dim its lights, signaling the end of the service. Outside, the city was quieter, the sky bruised with midnight. The car was waiting, but neither of them moved toward it. So, Elise said, hands in her coat pockets. Was this a date? Vivian's expression was unreadable. Did it feel like one? Elise thought for a moment. It felt like the start of something. Maybe. Vivian took a step closer. Not touching. Just presence. Would you want there to be a second part? Elise's throat went dry. That depends. On what? On whether this was about her. Or about me. Vivian's face softened. It started because of her. But it stayed because of you. Elise swallowed. Then yeah, I'd want a second part. Vivian didn't lean in. Didn't push. She just smiled. A real one. Not for the cameras. And it felt like the kind of smile that said, I see you. Elise smiled back. Good night, Vivian. Good night, Elise. And then, for the first time that night, they walked away from each other on purpose. No accidents, no confusion, just the possibility of return. Elise woke to sunlight slicing through the slats of her blinds and the distinct, unwelcome vibration of her phone buzzing relentlessly against the nightstand. She groaned, rolled over, and pulled the blanket over her head, willing the world to disappear for just a little longer. But the buzzing didn't stop. After the fourth call in a row, she finally reached out blindly, grabbed the phone, and squinted at the screen. 8 missed calls. 4 texts. All from the same person, Nina. With a sinking feeling in her stomach, Elise opened the messages. Elise, what the hell happened last night? You were on freaking TMZ. You SAT Nexio Vivian Hart, and they're calling you her secret bride. Call me or I'm coming over. Elise shot upright. Her heart pounded as she clicked through to her browser and searched her own name. The results were instant and horrifying. There it was, a picture of her in that borrowed navy dress, seated beside Vivian Hart, caught mid-smile. The headline read, Who is the mystery woman beside tech mogul Vivian Hart? Another, wedding without a bride. Or was there? And below that, countless blurry paparazzi shots from inside the Belrose Hotel, all capturing angles of her and Vivian looking vaguely couple-like. She scrolled down to a video, a short clip where Vivian leaned in and said something in Elise's ear. Elise was laughing. The camera had caught everything. Oh my God, Elise muttered, burying her face in her hands. The phone rang again. She answered before it could even vibrate. Nina, I swear, I didn't mean for any of this to happen. Are you kidding me? Nina's voice practically shattered her eardrum. You sat next to her. You were at the bridal table. You looked like you belonged there. People think you two are married. It was a mistake. A literal mix-up on the guest list. She had a name card for a different Elise, I guess, and you just stayed. She asked me to, Elise said quietly. There was a beat of silence on the other end. Wait, Nina said, voice softer. Are you telling me Vivian Hart asked you to stay? Yes. And then what? Elise leaned back against the headboard. Then we had dinner. Somewhere private. We talked. Oh my God. It wasn't like that. It wasn't romantic. But you liked her, Nina said. Elise didn't respond right away. The image of Vivian's smile at the end of the night returned, sharp and impossibly real. Maybe, she admitted. Another text came through. Elise checked it and froze. It was from an unknown number, but the message was simple. Are you free for lunch today? Nina's voice cut in again. Was that her? I think so. Are you going to say yes? Elise didn't answer. She ended the call and stared at the message for a long time. Her heart beat too fast.
Her mouth was dry.
She thought about last night, the way Vivian had looked at her, not like a stranger, but like a mirror she hadn't dared touch in years. She thought about how easy the conversation had been, how surprisingly comfortable silence had felt between them. And now the whole world thought something had happened, that something was happening. She hadn't asked for any of it. But part of her, the part that wasn't afraid, wanted to lean in instead of run. She typed back. Where? Within seconds, Vivian replied. 12:30. The cafe on 10th and Mercer. No cameras. Just me. Elise stared at the screen for a full minute before getting out of bed. The cafe was small, understated, and tucked into a side street with almost no foot traffic. Elise arrived early, something she never did, and immediately regretted not wearing something less ordinary. She'd gone for a casual sweater and jeans, trying not to overthink it, but now every inch of her felt too visible, too unprepared. Vivian was already there when she arrived, seated at a corner table with a cup of coffee in front of her and a tablet in her hand. No entourage, no driver, just her. Elise hesitated at the door for a moment before walking in. Vivian looked up and smiled, that same calm, unreadable expression that made Elise feel like she was walking into a test she hadn't studied for. You came, Vivian said. Elise sat down across from her. The internet thinks we're married. I saw. You're not freaking out? Vivian shrugged. I've been the subject of worse rumors. I'm not used to being known. Vivian tilted her head. Then let's keep it unknown. Just us. The waitress arrived, took their orders, and disappeared again. Elise stared at the steam rising from her coffee. I'm not someone who fits in your world, she said. I'm not asking you to fit into it, Vivian replied. I'm asking if you want to get to know me, not the headlines. Elise looked at her carefully. Why me? Still can't wrap my head around it. Vivian leaned forward slightly, resting her arms on the table. Because you didn't come to that wedding hoping to get something. You didn't ask for attention. You didn't even want to be there. And when I asked you to stay, you stayed anyway. That means something to me. Elise swallowed hard. What do you want from me, Vivian? Vivian's expression softened.
Time.
Honesty. And maybe a second chance at something that wasn't supposed to start, but somehow did. There was again that strange, quiet pull. Elise looked down at her hands, then up at the woman sitting across from her. And for the first time in a very long time, she didn't want to run. The sound of the cafe door closing behind her stayed with Elise longer than she expected. As she stepped back into the street, the chill of the afternoon air brushing against her skin, something in her chest felt different. Not lighter, not heavier, just more awake. She kept replaying Vivian's voice in her head, soft, steady, sincere, asking for something so simple it felt like a trick. Time, honesty, and a second chance at something unexpected. Elise walked the next few blocks without direction, letting the city carry her forward on instinct. Her phone buzzed twice in her pocket, but she didn't check it. The moment felt too real to interrupt. It wasn't until she reached her apartment, climbed the narrow steps, and dropped her keys on the counter that she finally exhaled. Then she laughed, quiet, breathy, disbelieving. How the hell had she ended up here? 24 hours ago, she'd been dreading a boring wedding filled with people she didn't know. Now, the whole internet thought she was in a relationship with a billionaire, and worse, she wasn't entirely sure she hated the idea. She opened her phone. One new text. From Vivian. Thank you for showing up. Let me know when I can return the favor. Elise stared at the message for a long time. Her thumbs hovered over the keyboard before she typed. Are you always this polite after accidentally fake marrying someone? Vivian's reply came seconds later. Only when I want it to happen again. Minus the audience. Elise's pulse kicked up. She read the message 3 times before letting her phone drop onto the bed. This wasn't a game. She could feel it. There was something real beginning to form. And if she let herself think about it too much, it might scare her off. So instead, she didn't think. She grabbed a hoodie, tied her hair up, and pulled out her laptop. Work had always been her anchor, the place where things made sense. But even as she opened her design software and started sketching a project she was behind on, her focus drifted. Shapes blurred. Colors lost meaning. All she could see was Vivian's expression across the cafe table, the way she'd said Elise's name like it wasn't just a label, but something she'd memorized on purpose.
The next few days passed like that.
A strange blend of routine and anticipation. Elise went to work, replied to emails, tried to act like nothing had changed, but everything had. She'd see Vivian's name in headlines, hear her voice in old podcast interviews, and suddenly, she was no longer just a distant icon. She was a person Elise had seen laugh, soften, listen. On Thursday afternoon, a messenger arrived at her office with a small black envelope. No branding, no note, just a card inside with elegant handwriting that read, "Dinner, Friday, 7 p.m. Dress however you feel most like yourself." Elise stared at the card for so long that her coworker, Jared, asked if she'd seen a ghost. She mumbled something about an old friend and shoved it in her bag. But the truth was, that card terrified her. It wasn't the dinner. It was the implication of it. Because now it wasn't an accident.
Now she would be choosing to go.
Friday arrived too fast. Elise spent an embarrassing amount of time staring at her closet, rejecting everything she owned. Too formal, too casual, too plain, too loud, too not her. And then, in a moment of surrender, she picked the outfit she wore when she felt most comfortable. Black jeans, a simple but fitted top, her favorite leather jacket. Not a statement, not a performance, just her. She arrived at the address 10 minutes early and spent the entire time pacing outside the restaurant, working through a list of reasons not to go in. But then the door opened, and Vivian stepped out, her expression calm and unreadable as always, but her eyes lit up when they met Elise's. "You're here," she said. Elise nodded. "I was afraid I wouldn't be." "Why?" "Because if I walk through that door, it means this is real. And I'm not used to things like this being real." Vivian took a step forward, her voice gentler than Elise had ever heard it. "Then let it be real at your pace. No rush, no pressure, just dinner. With me." Elise exhaled and nodded. Inside, the restaurant was quiet, warm, dimly lit. There were no cameras, no onlookers, just a private table and the sound of soft jazz in the background. For the first 10 minutes, Elise barely said anything. She let Vivian lead the conversation. About a book she was reading, a boardroom disaster she'd narrowly avoided, a childhood memory involving a broken violin, and a very angry music teacher. Slowly, Elise started to relax. She told Vivian about her first design gig, making a logo for a bakery that paid her in cookies. About the time she tried to dye her own hair in college and ended up looking like a traffic cone. They laughed. They listened. They paused between sentences and let the silence sit there without fear. And then, halfway through dessert, Vivian asked, "What scares you most about this?" Elise looked at her, surprised by the bluntness. But she answered, "That I'll start wanting more than what this is. And that maybe I don't belong in whatever more looks like with someone like you." Vivian didn't look away. "You do, whether you believe it yet or not." Elise didn't reply, but something inside her cracked open just a little more. By the end of the night, when they stood outside waiting for their cars, the air between them had changed. Not electric, not explosive, just charged with potential. Vivian stepped closer, just close enough that Elise could smell her perfume. "Thank you," she said. Elise tilted her head. "For what?" "For choosing to come. For making this real." Elise looked up at her, and in a moment of boldness that surprised even herself, she said, "I'm still scared." Vivian's voice was soft. "So am I." They didn't kiss. They didn't touch. But when Vivian's car pulled away and Elise stood there alone, she wasn't unsure anymore. She knew she'd see her again, not because she had to, but because now she wanted to. The third time they saw each other, Elise didn't feel nervous walking into the space, at least, not in the way she expected. It wasn't fear or doubt or that choking self-awareness that had wrapped around her chest the first 2 times. It was anticipation. Still sharp. Still buzzing under her skin. But warmer now. She was beginning to understand that being around Vivian didn't mean walking into something overwhelming. It meant stepping into a space where she was allowed to breathe a little deeper. Vivian had invited her to her apartment. Not a grand penthouse like the tabloids love to describe, but a surprisingly calm, modern place tucked into a quiet corner of Tribeca. Elise had imagined minimalist coldness, marble and chrome. Instead, she found warmth. Bookshelves full, art that felt personal rather than curated, soft lighting, and walls the color of overcast skies. Vivian opened the door barefoot, holding 2 mugs of coffee, wearing a loose gray sweater and no trace of the CEO mask she wore in public. "You came," she said softly. Elise stepped inside, suddenly more aware of her boots than she had any right to be. "You invited me." Vivian handed her a mug.
Still.
"You could have said no." Elise took a sip. Black coffee, just how she liked it. She arched an eyebrow. "You remembered." "I pay attention." The corners of Elise's lips curved. She looked around. "This place doesn't look like your press photos." Vivian shrugged. "That place isn't home. This is." They settled into the wide window seat in the living room, the city stretching endlessly behind them. No scripts. No interviews. Just space. And quiet. And the subtle awareness of being alone together. "Do you ever get used to people watching you all the time?" Elise asked after a moment. Vivian leaned her head back against the wall.
No.
"You just get better at pretending it doesn't bother you." Elise studied her profile, the way her jaw tightened at the admission, the way her eyes stayed on the skyline instead of her. "You looked calm at that wedding," Elise said. "When I sat next to you, you didn't flinch." "I've been taught to hold my expression no matter what," Vivian replied. "But inside I was shaking." Elise looked down at her mug.
"So was I."
Silence. And then Vivian turned her gaze toward her, her voice quieter. "You still are, sometimes." Elise nodded. Whatever this is, it's new for me. Not the dating. The feeling like it matters." Vivian's eyes searched hers. "It does matter." Elise nodded again. Slowly. "I know." The air between them thickened. Not tense, not awkward, but heavy with all the things they hadn't named yet. There was no rush, but there was gravity, and it was pulling them closer. Vivian shifted slightly. "Can I ask you something?" Elise looked at her. "Of course." "What would it take for you to stop being afraid of this?" Elise didn't answer right away. She took a breath. "It's not fear of you. It's fear of wanting too much. Of being disappointed. Of falling for the idea and not the person." "Then get to know the person," Vivian said. "I want you to." Elise smiled, small, real. "Okay. Ask me something." "Anything." "Anything." Vivian tilted her head. "What's your worst habit?" Elise laughed. "That's where you're starting." "It matters. Bad habits say more than good ones." Elise thought. "I disappear when I'm overwhelmed. Shut off my phone. Avoid people. I shut down." Vivian nodded. "Noted." "Your turn," Elise said. "What's yours?" Vivian didn't hesitate. "I work instead of feel." Elise met her eyes. "Also noted." They both laughed. And it was easy. Easier than either of them expected. Over the next hour, the questions continued, small ones, then deeper ones. Elise asked about Vivian's first kiss. Vivian asked Elise what kind of childhood she had. Elise admitted she still called her mom twice a week, even when nothing was wrong. Vivian confessed she'd once read the same book 3 times in a row just because it was the only thing that made her feel understood. And when the conversation slowed, when the soft hum of the city at dusk filled the room, Vivian reached out, not suddenly, not dramatically, just a quiet gesture, and brushed a strand of hair from Elise's face. Elise didn't flinch. Her breath caught, but she didn't move away. Vivian's hand lingered for a moment, then dropped. "Sorry," she said softly. "You had." "It's okay," Elise whispered. "They didn't kiss." "Not yet." But it was there. That almost. That ache. That promise neither of them dared to speak aloud. When Elise stood to leave, Vivian walked her to the door. No shoes. No pretense. Just a woman, in her home, looking at someone she wanted to keep letting in. "Thank you for coming," she said. "Thank you for letting me." "Can I see you again?" Vivian asked. "Yes," Elise said, without hesitation. This time, she wasn't afraid to want it. The knock came just after noon. Elise wasn't expecting anyone, and she hadn't left the apartment all morning. Her laptop open on the kitchen table, her second coffee half-finished beside it, and her focus entirely broken. She had been trying to work, trying to lose herself in fonts and colors and client revisions, but her thoughts kept drifting back to Vivian. The way her voice had softened. The way her hand had brushed Elise's cheek like she was afraid of breaking something fragile. Elise hadn't realized how long she'd been smiling until her jaw ached. She padded barefoot to the door and opened it cautiously, expecting maybe a package, maybe a neighbor. Instead, she found Nina, holding a coffee and wearing a look that said, "Sit down, we need to talk." Elise groaned. "Please don't tell me it's all over the internet again." Nina walked past her without waiting for an invitation, dropped her bag on the couch, and pulled up the article on her phone. "Try cover story," she said. Elise took the phone. The headline read, "Vivian Hart's secret bride revealed. The mystery woman finally identified." Below it, a photo of Elise from the night of the non-wedding, laughing, eyes on Vivian. The caption read, "Graphic designer Elise Morgan spotted again with tech mogul. Sources say the connection is more than friendship." Elise handed the phone back.
Well,
"That's subtle." Nina raised an eyebrow. "It's not going away, Elise. And it's only going to get louder." Elise sat on the edge of the couch, rubbing her temples. "I didn't ask for any of this." "But you didn't exactly walk away either," Nina said, her voice softer now. "Are you seeing her?" Elise didn't answer immediately. Then, yes. Nina's eyes widened. "As in, actually?" "As in, we're figuring it out. Slowly. Quietly." "There's nothing quiet about dating Vivian Hart," Nina muttered. "She's basically a walking headline." Elise looked at her, the question forming before she could stop it. "Do you think I'm being stupid?" Nina sighed, sat beside her. "I think you're being brave. But I also think you need to be prepared. If this becomes public, really public, your life changes. Not just for a week. Forever." Elise nodded. She knew. But knowing didn't make the want go away. That night, she sat on her fire escape, wrapped in a blanket, scrolling through her own name on Twitter like it belonged to someone else. People speculating, guessing. Some of them cruel, some disturbingly invested, others strangely supportive. But none of them knew her. Not really. Only one person did. And she hadn't heard from her all day. She didn't want to text first. Not because of pride, but because she didn't want to seem needy. Desperate. But by midnight, the ache of silence won. Elise typed, "Rough day. Missed your voice." The reply came 5 minutes later. "Come over.
no talking if you don't want."
Just space. And me." Elise didn't even change out of her sweater. She called a car, heart racing the entire ride. When she arrived at Vivian's, the door opened before she knocked. Vivian stood barefoot again, this time in a soft navy t-shirt and black lounge pants, hair down, eyes tired but warm. She didn't say anything, just opened her arms. Elise walked into them like she belonged there. No hesitation. No explanation. Just gravity. Vivian held her tightly, silently, the kind of hold that didn't demand anything in return. Elise pressed her face into her shoulder and let herself feel the weight of the day fall away. After a while, they sat on the couch. Still quiet. Still close. Elise's head rested on Vivian's shoulder, her fingers loosely curled against Vivian's thigh. Vivian's hand moved slowly through Elise's hair, calming.
Steady.
Intimate in a way that had nothing to do with performance. "I didn't mean to pull you into all this," Vivian said softly. "But I don't regret that you're here." Elise looked up. "Neither do I. But it's getting harder." Vivian nodded.
I know.
That's why I haven't called. I was trying to protect you. But maybe that's not my choice to make. Elise shifted to face her more fully. I don't need protection. I need honesty. Vivian's gaze met hers. Then here's the truth. I think about you more than I should. I check my phone like a teenager. I replay our last conversation before I fall asleep. And I keep telling myself to slow down, to let this breathe, but I don't want to let it go cold. Elise's voice was barely above a whisper. So don't. They didn't kiss immediately. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't desperate. It was quiet, inevitable, a slow lean, a breath between them, and then contact. Elise's lips brushed Vivian's, soft and searching, like she wasn't sure it was real until it deepened. Vivian responded with that same steadiness. She gave everything, measured, sure, but filled with a heat that caught Elise by surprise. The kiss grew. Not explosive, but consuming. Elise's hand found Vivian's shoulder, her neck, her jaw. Vivian's hands rested gently at her waist, then slid up her back. When they finally pulled apart, there was no need to speak. They sat there, foreheads touching, breathing each other in. And for the first time since it all began, Elise didn't feel like a mistake. She felt chosen, wanted,
Seen.
and that was scarier than anything else, but also more beautiful. Elise woke slowly, the kind of slow that came with warmth and softness and the quiet hum of safety. The first thing she registered was the weight of the blanket pulled halfway down her hip. The second was the faint sound of a city muffled by thick glass windows, and the third, the most grounding of all, was the feeling of a hand resting gently on her waist. Not possessive, just present. She turned her head slightly on the pillow and found Vivian still asleep beside her. One arm curled under her head, the other draped around Elise like it belonged there. Her hair was tousled, her breathing even, and for a long moment, Elise just stared at her, committing the sight to memory, as if afraid it might vanish. This wasn't how the night had been planned. It hadn't been planned at all. After the kiss, long, slow, and undeniable, they hadn't spoken much. Just looked at each other, touched carefully, moved together without rush or pressure. It wasn't about sex. It wasn't even about the physical. It was about trust. Permission. Want, yes, but something deeper too. Something neither of them had named out loud. Now, as sunlight filtered through the thin curtains, Elise shifted slowly, careful not to wake her. Her body ached in that quiet, pleasant way that came after closeness. But her mind was loud, not with regret. Never that. But with the weight of what this meant now. They had crossed a line. The fragile possibility of something had become the undeniable presence of someone. She was in Vivian Hart's bed. And for the first time, she wasn't wondering how she got there, she was wondering what came next. As she moved to slip out of bed, Vivian stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, still soft with sleep. She smiled, small and real. Hey. Elise paused. Did I wake you? Not really. Vivian reached for her hand, gently tugged her back down. You don't have to leave. Elise hesitated. I know. I just needed a second. Vivian's fingers traced small circles along the back of Elise's hand. You okay? Elise nodded. Just overthinking. It's a hobby. Vivian's gaze softened. You don't have to overthink with me. Elise let out a quiet laugh. That's a lovely idea. Completely unrealistic, but lovely. Vivian shifted onto her side, head propped on her arm. I'm serious. Whatever this is, whatever we're building, I don't want it if you feel like you have to manage it like a crisis. I want it to be easy. Safe. Relationships aren't easy, Vivian. Even the good ones. I know, she said, but I want to try. With you. Elise looked at her, at the vulnerability behind her composure. You really mean that? Vivian nodded. You're the first person in a long time who makes me feel like I can take the armor off. Elise felt her throat tighten. You make it sound simple. It's not. But I'd rather build something messy and real than perfect and empty. The words settled between them like a contract neither of them needed to sign out loud. Elise leaned forward and kissed her, light, grateful, affirming. The rest of the morning passed in fragments. Shared coffee in bed. Quiet conversation. Bare feet on cold floors. Laughter in the kitchen as Elise tried to make eggs and nearly set off the smoke alarm. Vivian leaned against the counter, arms crossed, watching her like she was seeing something she hadn't known she was missing. Later, when Elise finally dressed and prepared to leave, she paused at the door. "Am I walking out of something real?" she asked, voice soft. Vivian stepped closer. "I hope you're walking into something real." Elise smiled, kissed her again, and stepped into the hall. That night, back in her apartment, Elise lay awake for hours. It wasn't anxiety. It was something more complicated. The beginning of something serious didn't just bring warmth, it brought doubt. Fear of expectation. Fear of messing it up. And under it all, the still growing ache of the attention she was starting to receive. The next morning, she checked her email and found two strange messages. One from a journalist requesting comment. The other from a stranger calling her an opportunist. Her stomach dropped. She hadn't asked for this, hadn't chased it. But that didn't matter. The story was alive now. And it had teeth. She didn't tell Vivian. Not yet. Part of her didn't want to make it Vivian's problem. Part of her didn't want to seem overwhelmed. But the messages kept coming. DMs, tags, comments. Her name was everywhere. Elise Morgan. The accidental bride. The mystery girlfriend. The woman who didn't belong. She closed her laptop, shoved her phone into a drawer, and tried to breathe. Later that day, Vivian texted, "Want to come over tonight?" Elise stared at the screen, then typed, "Yes. But I need to talk to you about something." Vivian replied, "Okay, I'm here." When she arrived, Vivian greeted her with a kiss that melted some of the tension away, but not all of it. They sat together on the couch, knees touching, and Elise finally said what had been pressing against her chest. "People are starting to talk.
To dig.
It's getting ugly." Vivian was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I'm sorry. I should have warned you it would get worse before it got better." "It's not your fault," Elise said. "But it's happening. And I don't know how to exist in this." Vivian took her hand. "You don't have to navigate it alone." Elise nodded slowly. "I don't want to be someone who hides. But I also don't know how to be someone who's watched." Vivian squeezed her fingers. "Then let's figure it out together. No timeline. No rules. Just you and me." Elise leaned her head on Vivian's shoulder, her heart heavy and full at the same time. They sat like that for a long time. And in that stillness, Elise realized something that scared her more than the headlines, more than the strangers online. She was falling in love with Vivian. Quietly. Unstoppably. And maybe, just maybe, Vivian was falling too. Elise hadn't planned to cry. Not in Vivian's arms. Not in her apartment. Not over an article posted by a faceless writer who had never met her. But when she read the line, "A graphic designer from Brooklyn, Elise Morgan is a nobody in a world of billionaires. Rumors suggest she's an opportunist riding the wave of Vivian Hart's vulnerability." Something inside her cracked. She didn't cry for the insult. She cried for the part of her that wondered if it might be true. That tiny voice she kept shoving down, the one that whispered, "You don't belong here."
Vivian had found her like that.
Curled up on the sofa, phone in hand, screen still lit, face tight with emotion she hadn't allowed to surface. Vivian didn't say anything at first. She just sat beside her. Close. Present. Elise tried to blink away the tears, to make a joke, to pretend. But the words came out thin, brittle. "I don't know how to do this." Vivian took the phone from her hand and set it face down on the table. "Then don't do it alone." Elise shook her head. "This isn't just people talking anymore. They're digging. They found my high school blog. They're messaging my family. They're rewriting my life into something ugly." Vivian's voice was low, steady. "I'll make it stop." "You can't," Elise said. "You can't control the internet. Or public opinion. You can't buy silence." Vivian's jaw tightened.
"No."
"But I can protect you." Elise looked at her.
"How?"
Vivian didn't answer immediately. "By not hiding you anymore." The silence that followed was heavy. Elise felt it settle over her skin, through her bones. What does that mean? It means if we're going to do this, I want to do it with intention. No more pretending you're someone I bumped into. No more denying you matter to me. Elise's heart thudded painfully. You want to go public? Vivian nodded. I do. Elise stood, pacing the room. That's not a small thing. That's interviews. Headlines. Photographers waiting outside my apartment. Every part of my life becomes a conversation I didn't consent to. I know, Vivian said gently. But right now, people are talking anyway. At least if we take control, we can tell the truth. Elise turned to her. And what is the truth, Vivian? Vivian stepped closer. Not touching, not rushing, just letting the air between them shrink. The truth is I like you. A lot. And I'm tired of pretending I don't. Elise swallowed hard. That's the first time you've said it. It's the first time I let myself feel it. Elise closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, her voice was barely audible. I like you too. And it terrifies me. Why? Because you could make me fall harder than I've ever fallen. And I don't know if I'm strong enough for what comes after that. Vivian's eyes didn't waver. Then we fall carefully. Together. Elise let out a shaky breath. You make it sound simple. It's not, Vivian said. But it is worth it. That night, they didn't go out. They didn't talk to the press. They didn't even check their phones. They made dinner together. Well, mostly Elise trying and Vivian watching, and ended up eating cold pasta on the couch, legs tangled, laughter warming the space between them. At one point, Elise reached over and touched Vivian's face, thumb grazing the corner of her mouth, and whispered, You scare me, but in the best way. Vivian kissed her, slow and steady, and said, Then I'll be patient. And she was. Over the next week, they saw each other often, quiet dinners, morning coffees, late-night conversations that stretched into dawn. Elise met Vivian's dog. Vivian saw Elise's chaotic bookshelf. They didn't talk about the future yet, but it hovered between them like a soft promise. Until the interview aired. It was a short segment, just 7 minutes, filmed weeks before the non-wedding. Vivian had talked about legacy, about redefining success. And then, at the end, the host asked, Is there someone special in your life? Vivian had smiled. Just slightly. There might be, she'd said. But I think some things deserve the chance to grow in silence before they're offered to the noise. The internet exploded. Fans speculated. Gossip sites recycled everything. Elise's name trended again. Only this time, the tone had changed. It wasn't mockery anymore. It was curiosity. Obsession. Obsession with who she was, where she came from, why her. Elise felt her breath shortening with every headline. Vivian Hart's secret girlfriend. Who is Elise Morgan? The quiet artist who stole a billionaire's heart. She called Vivian, voice shaking. I can't do this if I disappear in it. If I stop being me. Vivian's response was quiet but clear. Then don't disappear. I'll help you stay visible. Stay you. Elise paused. Then asked the question she hadn't dared until now. Do you want this to be serious? Vivian didn't hesitate. It already is. And with that answer, Elise finally allowed herself to believe it. The invitation had been delivered on thick cardstock, wrapped in silver ribbon, with elegant calligraphy that made it feel more like a royal summons than a social event. Vivian's assistant had placed it carefully on her kitchen counter with a soft, You've been expected to attend for months. It was a charity gala. High profile. Black tie. Cameras, reporters, red carpet. The kind of night that built, or broke, reputations. And now, with the headlines still pulsing from the interview and her name once again tangled in the public's imagination, Vivian turned to Elise and said, I want you to come with me. Elise didn't respond immediately. She stood by the window, arms crossed, eyes locked on the skyline like it held the answer. You mean as in with you? Like officially? Vivian nodded. If you're willing. Elise turned to face her. You know what that means. Yes, Vivian said. It means the first photo of us together. It means speculation. Questions. Stories we won't be able to control. Elise let out a breath, slow and uncertain. It also means every part of my life gets cracked open. Vivian stepped closer. Then we don't go. I'd never ask you to do something you're not ready for. Elise searched her face. But you want me there. I want you with me always. But I won't rush you into the fire. Elise shook her head. You're not rushing me. I'm just choosing whether or not to jump. Vivian didn't speak, just waited. After a long pause, Elise said, Okay, I'll go. The next few days blurred into fittings, calls, quiet strategy sessions with Vivian's publicist, and a quiet, unspoken current of rising pressure. Elise watched herself being reshaped in photos she didn't know were taken, leaving Vivian's apartment, walking to work, sitting at a cafe alone. She'd become a story. And the story was spinning faster than she could hold it. But at night, when it was just them, no cameras, no stylists, no pressure, Vivian held her like she was still the woman she met by accident. And Elise held on tighter. The night of the gala arrived, and Elise stood in front of the full-length mirror in Vivian's room, staring at her reflection. The gown was deep green silk, fitted but not revealing, the neckline elegant, the back open. Her hair was up, soft strands framing her face. She looked beautiful, but also unfamiliar. You look like yourself, Vivian said behind her. Elise gave her a look through the mirror. I look like a fantasy version of myself. Vivian stepped behind her, resting her hands lightly on Elise's shoulders.
No.
You look like the woman I've been falling for since the moment you didn't run. Elise turned around, heart-catching. You've been falling? Vivian nodded. Yes. Elise whispered. Me too. The ride to the venue was silent except for the occasional touch, fingers brushing, eyes meeting. When the car pulled up to the red carpet, Elise felt her pulse rise like a tidal wave. The door opened. Flashing lights. Voices. Vivian, is that Elise Morgan? Vivian, are you confirming the relationship? Elise reached for Vivian's hand. Vivian gripped hers firmly. We step out together, she said. And we walk. No matter what they say. Eyes on me. Elise nodded. One breath.
Two.
Then she stepped out into the light. The flashing cameras were relentless. The shouting louder than she'd imagined. Questions flew like arrows. But Vivian's hand stayed wrapped around hers. Vivian didn't rush. Didn't flinch. She moved with the calm confidence Elise envied, her smile soft but unyielding. Elise focused on the contact, hand in hand. A quiet promise. When they reached the photo area, Vivian paused, turned toward her slightly, and whispered, We can stop here. Elise looked at her.
No.
I want to finish this. With you. They posed together. Not stiffly. Not like a performance. Just two women standing side by side in a storm of attention they hadn't asked for. And for the first time, Elise didn't feel like an intruder. She felt chosen. Later, inside the venue, the atmosphere was dim, warm, full of glass and laughter and elegant disinterest. Vivian introduced Elise to CEOs, actors, artists. Elise smiled, nodded, answered questions politely. She kept a glass of water in her hand and counted her breaths between conversations. But every time she looked up, Vivian was watching her, quietly, protectively, proudly. At one point, after the third small talk spiral in a row, Elise escaped to the balcony. Vivian found her there a few minutes later. You okay? Elise leaned against the railing. I don't know. I feel like I've been wearing someone else's skin all night. Vivian stepped beside her. Do you regret coming? Elise shook her head.
No.
But I'm scared that this will keep growing, that I'll lose myself. Vivian was silent for a moment. Then she said, If I ever make you feel like you're disappearing, tell me. Scream it. Walk away if you have to. But don't let this swallow you. Elise turned to her. I don't want to walk away. Vivian reached out and cupped her face. Then let's keep choosing each other. Every step. Elise leaned into the touch. You promise? Vivian's voice didn't shake. I promise. When they kissed on that balcony, just once brief, but seen, it was the image that would land on every magazine cover the next morning.
But they didn't think about that yet.
For now, all they felt was the night air, the shared breath between them, and the solid, undeniable truth of what they were building. Something real. Something chosen. Elise had thought the kiss on the balcony would be the moment everything shifted. And it was. But not in the way she expected. She had imagined a slow ripple, maybe a few more articles, some interviews reaching out, a bit of noise that would fade over time. But by the next morning, it was clear this was not a ripple. It was a tidal wave. Her face was on the homepage of every news outlet that covered celebrity culture. Not as a footnote. As the headline. Vivian Hart makes it official. Meet her girlfriend, Elise Morgan. The photo was everywhere. Elise in green silk, Vivian's hand on her waist, lips brushing under the soft city lights. It was intimate. Too intimate. It hadn't been posed, hadn't been planned. And that made it all the more explosive. Her inbox filled in minutes. So did her voicemail. Her social media notifications. Then came the calls from people she hadn't spoken to in years. Elise. The voice came through her phone around 10 a.m. She recognized it instantly. Her chest tightened.
Dylan.
Wow, he said, a little bitter, a little amused. Didn't think I'd be hearing about you on the news. Elise swallowed hard, walking into her bedroom to get away from the noise outside. It's been a while.
3 years, he said.
3 years, and suddenly you're the most Googled name on the internet. What do you want? She asked, trying to keep her voice calm. Just wondering if all this is real. Or if it's just a performance. Elise felt heat rise in her neck. It's real. So you're actually dating her? Yes. Silence. Then, and she knows? Knows what? Elise asked sharply.
You know what? Dylan said.
Everything.
About before.
About us. Elise's blood turned cold. That's none of your business anymore. It might be hers, he said. Especially now that you're the center of attention. Don't call me again, she snapped and hung up. Her hands were shaking. She didn't realize she was crying until she sat down on the edge of the bed and wiped at her face. It wasn't just the call. It was the way it made her feel. Exposed, cracked open, dragged back into a life she'd spent years trying to rebuild. When Vivian texted a few minutes later, "You okay? I saw the headlines. Wanna come over?" Elise didn't answer right away. She needed space. But more than that, she needed to figure out how much of her past she was ready to share. And if Vivian would still look at her the same way when she did. That night, after hours of trying to work and failing, Elise finally packed a small bag and called a car to Vivian's. The door opened before she knocked. Vivian didn't ask questions. She just pulled Elise inside and held her, the kind of hold that said, "I see you even when you're silent." They sat on the couch, wrapped in one blanket, neither speaking for a long time. Then, finally, Elise said, "Someone called me today. From my past." Vivian looked at her carefully. "Someone who hurt you?" "Someone I used to love. A long time ago. It ended badly. And now they're reaching out because of all this?" "Yes." Vivian didn't flinch. "Do you want to talk about it?" Elise hesitated. Then, quietly, "I used to be engaged. To a man. Dylan." Vivian blinked but didn't speak. Elise continued, voice steadier now. "We were young. It was safe. We made sense on paper. But it never felt right. I kept telling myself it was enough, that maybe I just wasn't passionate, maybe love wasn't fireworks for everyone. But the closer the wedding got, the more I felt like I was choking." Vivian was silent, listening. Elise looked down. "I left him 3 weeks before the wedding. I didn't give a big explanation. I didn't even fully understand it myself then. All I knew was that I couldn't spend my life lying to myself about what I wanted, who I was." She looked up, eyes glassy. He was furious. Said I ruined him. And maybe I did. But I saved myself. Vivian's expression didn't change. She just reached out, took Elise's hand. "Thank you for telling me." Elise searched her face. "You're not upset?" "Why would I be?" "Because I lied by omission. I didn't tell you earlier." Vivian squeezed her hand. "You told me when you were ready. That's not lying. That's protecting your peace. Elise exhaled, something inside her loosening. I was afraid you'd think I wasn't sure about you. About us. I'm not him, Vivian said. And you're not who you were back then. You're here. With me.
Choosing this.
That's what matters. Elise nodded, a tear slipping down her cheek. Vivian leaned in, wiped it gently away. Do you still love him? No, Elise said immediately. I don't think I ever did. Not like this. Vivian smiled softly. Then let's not let his voice be louder than ours. That night, they lay in bed, not touching at first, just breathing together. Then Elise rolled onto her side, pulled Vivian closer, and rested her head against her chest. I'm scared of losing myself in all this, she whispered. You won't, Vivian said, because I'll remind you who you are, even on the days you forget. Elise closed her eyes, and for the first time since the call, she believed it. The story broke on a Wednesday. Elise was walking home from the bookstore, paper bag tucked under her arm, when her phone started buzzing nonstop. She didn't check it right away. She'd promised herself an hour offline, just 1 hour to be present, to remember who she was without all the noise. But when she saw Nina's name flash across the screen 3 times in a row, she knew. Her fingers trembled as she opened the link. Vivian Hart's girlfriend once fled her own wedding. Former fiancé speaks out. There it was. Her past no longer hers. The article painted her as cold, unstable, indecisive. A woman who couldn't commit. Who ran when things got too real. Dylan's quotes were carefully crafted, just vague enough to seem fair, just pointed enough to be cruel. I hope she's finally found what she wants. I just wish she hadn't needed to destroy me to figure that out. Elise felt her knees go weak. She sat on the edge of a bench, blinking hard. The comments were worse. Strangers speculating about her motives, her history, her sexuality, her worth. A few defended her. Most didn't. She tried to breathe. To remind herself she wasn't that girl anymore. That the woman Dylan had loved never existed, not fully. Vivian called as she was unlocking her door. Elise answered on the 3rd ring. I saw it, Vivian said. Her voice was steady, controlled. But there was something behind it, anger, quiet and deep. Are you okay? Elise didn't lie.
No.
But I'm managing. Do you want me to come to you?
No.
I want to come to you. Vivian paused. Then I'm waiting. The moment Elise walked into Vivian's apartment, she collapsed into her arms. They didn't talk right away. Just stood there, bodies pressed together, the silence holding everything they couldn't say. Later, wrapped in a blanket on the couch, Vivian finally spoke. I'm going to have my legal team respond. We can shut this down. No, Elise said softly. Let them say what they want. I'm done hiding. Vivian turned to her. Are you sure? Elise nodded. I want people to know who I really am. And if they only see half the story, that's on them. I won't let shame write my narrative anymore. Vivian looked at her, eyes full of something fierce and tender. You amaze me. You steady me, Elise replied. That's how I'm able to do this. A beat passed. Then Vivian said, My mother wants to meet you. Elise blinked. Wait, what? Vivian gave a small smile.
She knows about you.
She saw the photos. And she asked when I was going to stop pretending you were just a friend. Elise's stomach flipped. And you said? I said you weren't ready yet. But maybe you are. Elise stared at her. Vivian, meeting your mother is a lot. I know, she said gently. But you've been carrying the weight of my world for weeks. I want you to see the parts of it that matter most. The ones I protect. Elise hesitated. You're not trying to distract me from the article, are you? Vivian's expression softened.
No.
I'm trying to remind you that you're not defined by people who left you. Only by the ones who choose you again and again. The next day, Elise dressed with care. Not for the press. Not for strangers. But for a woman she hadn't met yet who had raised the person she was falling for. Vivian drove them herself, no car service, no driver. Just her, hands steady on the wheel, eyes flicking to Elise at stoplights with small, reassuring smiles. They arrived at a brownstone in Harlem, ivy creeping along the iron gate. The door opened before they knocked. Vivian's mother was tall, poised, with silver-streaked curls and eyes that missed nothing. She hugged Vivian tightly, then looked at Elise. "So you're the one who made her soft." Elise blinked. "Excuse me?" "She's been steel since she was 12, the woman said. "But lately? I see warmth." "That's you." Elise flushed. "I thank you." They ate in the garden, under string lights and the smell of rosemary from a nearby planter. Vivian's mother told stories about Vivian as a child, fierce, independent, stubborn as hell. Elise laughed more than she expected to. She felt welcome.
Scene.
After dessert, as they sipped tea, Vivian excused herself to take a call. Elise and her mother sat in silence for a moment. Then the older woman said, "She's never brought anyone here. Not once. Not even the woman we thought she'd marry." Elise looked at her, surprised. "Really?" "Really," she said. "So, I don't know what this is between you two, but it's real. Because this house, this garden, these are her walls, and you're inside them." Elise felt her throat tighten. "I'm trying not to mess it up." "Then don't," she said simply. "Be honest. Be steady." That's all she needs. On the way home, Elise rested her head against the window and whispered, "Your mom's terrifying." Vivian laughed. That was her being warm. She said, "I made you soft." Vivian reached for her hand. "You did." Elise turned to her, eyes shining. "Then let me stay that way." The email came in the middle of the night. Elise had left her laptop open, the glow of the screen casting a faint light across the bedroom while she lay curled against Vivian's back, her arm draped over the woman she was slowly learning how to love without fear. She wasn't expecting anything urgent, but the subject line caught her eye when she turned over to plug in her charger. "Request for interview. Your story deserves a voice." The sender was a respected journalist, one who is known not for gossip, but for truth, for empathy, for depth. Still, Elise's stomach tightened. The message was kind, too kind, maybe. It acknowledged the firestorm, the headlines, the speculation. It offered her a chance to speak, not as a scandal, not as a side character in Vivian's life, but as herself. On her own terms. No ambush, it said. No trick questions. Just a conversation. Just truth. She closed the laptop and didn't sleep. The next morning, over coffee, she told Vivian, "I got an interview request." Vivian set her mug down carefully. "Who?" "Emma Glass, the documentary-style interviewer. It would air on national TV. Nothing tabloid." Vivian looked at her, searching. "And how do you feel about it?" "Like if I say yes, I might lose something. And if I say no, I might already be losing something anyway." "What do you think you'd say if you went?" Elise shrugged. "I don't know. That I didn't ask for this? That I was just a +1 at a wedding I didn't belong at? That I sat down beside you, and everything changed, and I'm still trying to understand how." Vivian reached across the table, her hand resting over Elise's. "You don't owe anyone an explanation." Elise nodded. "I know, but maybe I owe one to myself." That evening, Elise went for a walk alone. No destination, just movement. She passed a coffee shop where someone recognized her, whispered her name, took a photo without asking. She didn't stop them, but she didn't smile either. She kept walking until her feet ached, until her mind slowed, until she could breathe again. When she returned to Vivian's, the apartment was dim and quiet. Vivian was reading on the couch, barefoot, glasses sliding down her nose, hair loose. She looked up when Elise walked in. "Hey. Hey." Elise hesitated in the doorway. "Can we talk?" "Always." Elise sat beside her, folding her legs underneath herself. "I think I want to do the interview." Vivian didn't speak at first. Then, "You don't have to explain. But if you want to tell me why, I'll listen." Elise took a breath. "Because I feel like I've been reacting this entire time, running from things, letting other people shape the story. And I don't want that anymore. I want my voice back. Vivian reached out, brushed a strand of hair from Elise's cheek. Then do it. I'll be watching. I'll be waiting for you on the other side of it. Elise smiled, nerves flickering just beneath her skin. What if I mess it up? Then you mess it up. And we deal with it.
Together.
The interview was scheduled for 3 days later. A private studio. No live audience. Just Elise, the interviewer, and 2 cameras. She wore something simple, a navy blouse, dark jeans, minimal makeup. She didn't want to be polished. She wanted to be seen. When the lights came on, her heart pounded so loudly, she thought it might drown out the questions. But Emma Glass was gentle. She didn't prod. She didn't poke. She simply asked, "Who are you, Elise Morgan?" And Elise answered, "I'm someone who used to think quiet meant invisible. That if I kept my head down, no one would notice me, and that was safer. But then I sat at the wrong table at a wedding, and the wrong place became the right place. And I met someone who saw me before I could even see myself." Emma smiled. "Did you fall in love?" Elise hesitated. "I'm still falling. Every day." The interview was honest, messy in parts, emotional. She talked about Dylan, not by name, but by the lessons she carried. She talked about fear.
About shame.
About rebuilding herself from the ground up.
And about Vivian.
About how love with her didn't feel like being consumed. It felt like being built. The segment aired 2 nights later. Elise and Vivian watched it from the couch, wrapped in a blanket, popcorn between them, hands laced. The reaction was immediate and different this time. People weren't calling her a mystery woman anymore. They were calling her brave, calling her real. And for once, she believed it. Later that night, as they lay in bed, Vivian turned to her and said, "You made people see you. But more importantly, you reminded me how to see myself, too." Elise whispered, "I love you." The words came out without panic, without hesitation. Vivian froze for a second, then smiled slow, deep, full. "I love you too." And just like that, the noise of the world faded into something small. And what was left was 2 women, in a quiet room, choosing each other over and over. The city outside was alive as always, horns, lights, the dull hum of traffic rising into the sky, but inside the apartment, everything was still. Soft music drifted from the speakers in the living room, something slow and wordless, the kind of melody that filled space without stealing attention. Elise stood barefoot in the center of Vivian's bedroom, her fingertips trailing along the edge of the dresser, the soft fabric of her t-shirt brushing against her thighs. She could hear Vivian in the kitchen, her quiet footsteps, the sound of water running, 2 wine glasses clinking. The interview had aired 2 days ago. The storm had not disappeared, but something had shifted. For the first time, Elise wasn't afraid of being seen. She wasn't shrinking from the noise. She'd spoken her truth, and instead of shattering, she had found herself still standing. Stronger. Clearer. And now, all that remained between them was the silence that follows survival, the moment when you realize the storm has passed, and all that's left is what you've chosen to keep. When Vivian walked in, carrying both glasses, her eyes met Elise's like they always did now, without defenses. She handed her a glass, their fingers brushing, and said, "To the quiet after." Elise smiled. "To finally hearing ourselves think." They drank. They sat on the edge of the bed, knees touching, bodies turned inward. The wine was rich and warm, but it wasn't the alcohol that made Elise feel light. It was the way Vivian looked at her, like she was already known, already safe. "Can I ask you something?" Elise said softly. Vivian nodded. "Always." "When did you know?" "Know what?" "That this wasn't temporary." Vivian's expression didn't waver. "The second night. When you came over without makeup, in that worn hoodie, and fell asleep on my shoulder mid-sentence. That was the moment I stopped protecting myself." Elise laughed gently, eyes misting. "I didn't think I was doing anything special." "You weren't. You were just being you. And that was everything." Elise set her glass down. Vivian followed. The space between them shifted, not with urgency, but with gravity. Elise reached out first, fingers finding Vivian's, then her wrist, then the soft slope of her jaw. Vivian's breath caught, but she didn't move away. Elise leaned in slowly, brushing her lips once against hers. Gentle, deliberate. When they kissed again, it deepened. Not rushed. Not demanding. Just open. Willing. Elise pulled back enough to whisper, "I want to stay tonight." Vivian's voice was low, reverent. "Stay. Stay as long as you want." Elise kissed her again. Hands explored with patience. Mouths opened with trust. They undressed each other like memory, slow, full of pauses, of looking. Elise had never been touched this way before. With worship. With patience. Vivian's hands traced her skin like she was learning a language she intended to speak fluently. When they finally lay skin to skin, everything else fell away. Elise's breath hitched as Vivian's lips pressed into the curve of her neck, her shoulder, the soft space just above her heart. There was no performance in the way they moved together, only listening, only giving, only the soft push and pull of desire wrapped in something deeper. Elise ran her hands down Vivian's back, whispering her name like a tether. Vivian buried her face into the crook of Elise's neck and said, "I've never wanted to give myself to someone like this." "Then don't give," Elise murmured. "Just be with me." When they came undone, it wasn't fireworks, it was surrender. It was exhale. It was the quiet collapse of walls that had stood for too long. After, they lay tangled in the sheets, the window cracked open to let the breeze in. Elise rested her head on Vivian's chest, fingers tracing lazy lines along her arm. Vivian's hand stroked her back in long, slow motions. Neither of them spoke for a long time. Then Elise said, "I was always scared intimacy would feel like losing something. But this feels like gaining everything I didn't know I was missing." Vivian pressed her lips to Elise's forehead. "You didn't lose yourself. You just made space for someone else inside the life you're building." Elise nodded against her. "And I want that space to stay yours." Vivian pulled her closer. "Then we protect it. Together." As the city breathed beneath them and the soft sounds of the world returned, Elise fell asleep in the arms of the only woman who had ever made her feel whole. Not because she fixed her, not because she saved her, but because she saw her, chose her, and stayed. There were still things to face, conversations to have,
Decisions to make.
but all of that could wait. For now, there was this, the quiet after, the love that had grown in the center of the storm, and the feeling of being at last exactly where she was meant to be. Spring came slowly that year. The cold softened week by week, the air shifting from bitter to brisk to something almost warm. Trees began to bloom. Sidewalk cafes reopened. The city exhaled after months of holding its breath. And Elise, for the first time in years, wasn't bracing for something to go wrong. She was simply living. Her mornings had a rhythm now. Coffee with too much oat milk. A quiet inbox. Walks to her favorite bookstore. And more often than not, she ended her day at Vivian's, sometimes cooking, sometimes dancing barefoot in the kitchen, sometimes just lying tangled together in bed with no need for words. But the best part wasn't the comfort. It was the clarity, the knowing. She didn't have to guess where she stood anymore. She didn't have to apologize for being loved out loud. Vivian had made it clear, at home, in public, in everything she said and did, that Elise wasn't a moment. She was the plan. It showed in the little things. The toothbrush waiting beside Vivian's sink. The spare key slipped into Elise's hand one quiet morning. The way Vivian would glance at her during meetings, her gaze softening, even when surrounded by board members in $1,000 suits. But something else had started to stir too, not a threat but a shift. Elise had been offered an opportunity. A creative director role at a boutique design firm in London. The email had come through a week ago. She hadn't told Vivian yet. Not because she wanted to hide it, but because she needed to understand her own heart first. What did she want? Not for her career. For her life.
For them.
And the answer, when it finally arrived, wasn't loud or dramatic. It was simple. She wanted to build something with Vivian. Not around her. Not in her shadow. With her. Side by side. I got an offer, Elise said one evening as they sat on the balcony with glasses of wine and a blanket over their legs. Vivian looked up. What kind of offer? A design job in London. Creative director. Small firm. Big potential. A pause. That's amazing. Elise nodded. It is. And it made me realize something. What's that? Elise turned to her, eyes steady. That I could say yes to that job and start over again. Or I could say yes to us and start something real. Something that doesn't require leaving the life I actually want. Vivian set her glass down. Are you saying? I want to stay. But I don't want to just stay. I want to grow here. With you. Not as someone you support. Not as someone the world sees as your plus one. But as your partner. Vivian reached for her hand, voice low. You already are. Then let's make it official. Vivian blinked. Elise, I don't mean rings or ceremonies or headlines, Elise said. I mean life. Apartment keys. Grocery lists. Holidays. Everything. Vivian leaned in, forehead against hers. You have no idea how long I've waited to hear you say that. You waited exactly 15 chapters, Elise teased, smiling. Vivian laughed, then kissed her, long, soft, certain. Weeks passed. They moved into a new place together, a quiet loft with light that poured in through tall windows and a kitchen big enough for two people to burn pancakes in together. Elise started freelancing again, taking on passion projects, using her platform to mentor young designers. Vivian continued running her empire, but now, her calendar had carved out blocks labeled Elise time and non-negotiable slow mornings. They went to brunches, to museums, to weekends upstate. They still fought sometimes, over dishes, over work, over where to order takeout. But it was never cruel, never uncertain. The love between them had edges now, but also roots. And one Saturday afternoon, sitting on a picnic blanket in Central Park, Vivian reached into her bag, pulled out a small velvet box, and handed it to Elise without a word. Elise opened it. Inside was a ring. Simple. Elegant. No diamonds. Just gold, curved like a soft promise. This isn't a proposal, Vivian said. Not yet. This is a placeholder. For when we both feel ready. But I wanted you to have something that says what I can't stop feeling. Elise slipped it onto her finger. Then let me give you something too. She leaned forward and kissed her. Not like a goodbye. Not like a question.
But like a vow.
A few feet away, a tourist with a camera asked if they wanted a picture. Elise looked at Vivian. Do you mind? Not anymore, Vivian said. And they posed, smiling, fingers intertwined, sun on their faces. Two women who met by accident.
Who stayed by choice. Who loved by design.
And who, in a world full of noise, had built something no headline could touch. If you enjoyed this content and want to support the channel in a special way, try clicking the thanks button below. It's the one with the heart and $sign icon. With super thanks, you can make a direct contribution to the channel, which helps me keep creating awesome videos for you.